Hi there. This is your serial cynic once again. Another topic. And about the black Israelites once again. Um, Again, like I keep saying in my other videos, when I started this channel, the black Hebrew Israelites happened to be a topic of discussion amongst my social media friends. So as I started this channel and we were discussing it, they just became the natural go-to topic. And again, this is to provoke conversation, not provoke anger and all this type of stuff. I don't want anybody getting all violent because I know sometimes these guys, at least some of them, I'm not saying all the various groups that they are because there are different sects of them. But I know this can sometimes get a little angry and so forth. But when I hear the talk, it's almost as if me as a black man, you don't understand. You don't get it. If you don't understand this truth that we're teaching about you as the black man, you're not proud, you're living below your calling. You don't understand how special you are. You don't understand that you need to get back to the laws of Yahweh or Elohim or whatever they call him. And so they might get all over you for not getting it. And my whole thing is, come on. Come on. And just because I'm not on your bandwagon does not mean that I hate my black skin or whatever. You're probably not going to find the proud black man that I am, especially the fact that I'm from the Caribbean. I wear that out on my sleeve. As a matter of fact, talking about sleeve, let me show you something. Let me see if I can get this going. Look, take a look right here. I'm in my daughter's room, by the way. It says Virgin Islands. I have two bracelets on my hands that talks about the Virgin Islands. Outside of my living room, I have a Virgin Islands flag. Inside my other daughter's bedroom, there's a flag of St. Kitts and Nevis up in her roof. I have a cap with the Virgin Islands on there. You're not going to find a person more proud of his heritage and roots, going even beyond the Caribbean, back to Africa than I am. But just because I don't believe the nonsense you're out there talking about throwing in the Bible to legitimize my identity, to give me a sense of security, to make me feel like I'm God's or Yahweh's special snowflake, doesn't mean I'm not proud of who I am and where I come from. So let's get that straight, okay? But here's what I want to talk about with this. When black Hebrew Israelites talk, their focus is generally on, I don't know if all the groups, mind you, because I do understand that there are different groups, different levels of fervor, and there's some of them who probably mind their own business and can care less what other people think, or believe, or hold true. They just feel that they're the true black people or the true people of God and so forth, and probably keep that to themselves. But you have the other groups that are boisterous on the street corner here in New York City, and now they're making their way down to the Caribbean. I saw them in St. Martin the other day, where my stepfather's from. They were in St. Kitts a few weeks ago, where I was raised and where my father's from, and they're around. But one of the things when they're there talking and saying all these different things, they try to point out that it's us black people on this side of the world. We are the true Jews. We are the true Hebrews. We are the true people of God. And like I pointed out in my other video, it's a special snowflake syndrome. Don't you know how special we are? Don't you know we are the people of God? And once you start thinking that, it's like, well, what about other people? Then you find all kind of other epithets to give to those other people. They are white devils, they are blue-eyed this, they are that, and whatever the case might be, because you're so special. But one of the things that they don't mention, or you don't hear them talk about a lot, is in some groups, they focus on the dispersion of the population during the invasion by the Roman Emperor Titus in 70 CE. I don't say AD, I say CE, which means common era. And it is true that Titus came in invaded the land, Jerusalem, because the Jews were just giving him so much problems and giving the Roman Empire so much problems that he decided to come down and invade and teach them a lesson. He burnt the temple down to the ground. And yes, he did exile people from the population there. Naturally, and you just have to just think, some of these people escaped. Some most likely escaped onto the African continent. The close proximity, it only makes sense. And as a matter of fact, one of the last strongholds during this invasion was the Masada, which was going toward Egypt in Africa. So of course it's logical to believe that some Jews escaped. Some of these rebels or whoever was rebelling against the Roman Empire escaped with their families into the African continent. We may not know where they ended up, but logically you think that they ended up in places like Egypt, Ethiopia, Eritrea, those areas up there in northeastern Africa, because again, it's close proximity. Another place a lot of them could have escaped to and most likely did was over into the Arabian Peninsula, right next door. Settle in Saudi Arabia, what we call Saudi Arabia today. Probably ended up in places like Yemen, Qatar, those areas out there, way to the edges of the Arabian Peninsula. Again, that's for those who are on the southern side and running south. Those in the northern part of the land of Judea probably ran to the north, again, to escape the Romans, knew what was happening, knew what was coming down. They probably ran into places like what we call modern day Iraq today, Syria, Lebanon, probably as far as Iran, probably over into the Indian subcontinent. So while black Hebrew Israelites focus on, well, before I even mention that, then of course Titus himself grabbed a lot of these Jews and dragged them back to Rome as war trophies, paraded them around probably on the victory parade. These are our captives, Jews. Enslaved them, sold them into slavery to wealthy families in Rome and other parts of the Roman Empire, probably as far as England, what we call England today. So to think that during this dispersion of Jews, or whatever the case might be, that they only ended up in Africa would be very, very narrow thinking. Not to mention the fact that in history, it is mentioned that Titus took a bunch of them to Rome itself. What happened to those Jews? That's not Africa. Where did they go? Where did they assimilate into? What families did they start? What cities did they found? What cities did they migrate to and end up in? What about them? What about those Jews that escaped to the Arabian Peninsula, went to places like Yemen and Qatar, the United Arab Emirates? What about those who probably escaped and ended up in places like Iran and so forth? And that's just Titus. We have the Babylonian captivity 600 years before that. And Nebuchadnezzar came down, and when he invaded the kingdom of Judah, and he exiled a bunch of Jews to Babylon. Again, in that case, the Bible does tell you, whether you believe it or not, which I really don't, but it's plausible and logical, that there were Jews who escaped that invasion and ran into the African continent. Could have ended up in West Africa for all we know. I'm not denying that. That's a real possibility. But is that the only place they went? Is that the only place they escaped to? I doubt it. I'm sure a lot of them also ran into the Arabian Peninsula again and fled to different places. Not to mention the many that he exiled to Babylon itself. And for those of you who don't know where Babylon would have been in today's world, it's in the area of modern Iraq. He exiled them there. And in the Bible, if you want to go with the Bible, Nehemiah and Ezra 70 years later or sometime after the invasion of the Babylonians, brought back a contingent of Jews back to their ancient homeland of Judah or Israel. I think there was a number of about 42,000. Now the question becomes, what happened to all the others that Nebuchadnezzar exiled over there? Where did they go? When the Persians took over from the Babylonians, where did these Jews go? What happened to them? Those that stayed back in Babylon, who didn't feel like going back to their ancient homeland. Young, born in Babylon, probably that's all they know. Hey, I'm not going over there to my family's homeland. They didn't all come back. We find out that there's a thriving community of Jews in Babylon long after the Babylonian captivity. It became a Mecca for Jewish thinking and learning during Persian times and beyond. That's Jews in Babylon alone and along the Euphrates River. Unless you think people are just static there, just like they were exiled and that's where they stayed, which it's highly unlikely. So most likely a lot of them migrated to other places. Move further west, move further east, move further north. That's another group of Jews that went in a completely different direction than Africa. And then in the early 130s CE, close to 70 years after Titus's invasion on Jerusalem, another Roman emperor came through, and his name was Hadrian. And he came there to crush the Bar Kokhba revolt. Because again, Jews were acting up. That tells you that there were still Jews living in the land, mind you, even after Titus's invasion. They revolted again. Hadrian came down and he took care of the mess. And what he did, he depopulated the city of Jerusalem. Look, I'm banning all Jews from being in this city. Out of here. Get out. You come in here, you're dead. I am sure during his invasion, you probably had Jews that escaped to Africa again. Some to the Arabian Peninsula. Some up the coast to Syria, Asia Minor, Iran, Iraq, probably the Indian subcontinent, probably as far as China, probably scattered into Europe. And here's another thing. Josephus, the great Jewish historian, writing around Titus's invasion, because he was one of those Jews that basically switched sides and went over on the Roman side and aided the Romans. But he was a Jewish historian who wrote about the Jewish history and what was going on at the time. In his writings, he talks about the other tribes of Israel that were supposed to be lost. He mentions them. And I didn't even mention them as yet, because what I've been talking about here are the people from the tribe of Judah and Benjamin that made up the kingdom of Judah, who became known as Jews, basically. I haven't even mentioned the other 10 tribes. But in Josephus' time, he writes about them. And what does he say? He said, as of today, as of right now that I'm living, there are a bunch of Israelites that still live along the Euphrates River. And their numbers are immense. And while he mentions them just living at the Euphrates alone, probably from the old Babylonian captivity, he mentions the fact that there are others in Asia and Europe who are living under the Romans. Again, what about those Israelites? Where are they? Where did they go? Where did they end up? What did they start? And then we read about the Assyrians when they invaded the kingdom of Israel before Nebuchadnezzar invaded the kingdom of Judah. They scattered the Israelites from those other 10 tribes. Probably took them back to Assyria and scattered them all around the place. Just go here, go there, just threw them all over the place, sold them off into slavery. Do we think those people died out and that was just the end of them? Or did they intermarry, meet other people, blend in with other cultures, well beyond the Euphrates, in places we call Uzbekistan today, or Pakistan, or Afghanistan, the Russian steppes, the Caspian Sea, the Black Sea, southern Russia, Eastern Europe, Western Europe. So I've just mentioned what? The Assyrian invasion, the Babylonian invasion, and the two Roman invasions, and all the scatterings that took place in all of those. And black Hebrew Israelites, you mean to then tell me that the only place these Hebrews ended up is in Western Africa, who supposedly came over here on slave ships, and we're their descendants? If you went ahead and said, yes, we are one group, mind you, just us and whatever, and of course that's all debatable and so forth, even though, yes, it's logical that Jews made it to Africa and so forth, not to mention the fact that they came in waves, probably came as merchants, probably fleeing invasions, those who came from Spain and Portugal over into North Africa, escaping the Inquisition and so forth. There's just been Jews just going up and down, and Israelites going up and down, and all these different invasions going left and right, and fleeing persecutions and so forth. But for you to narrow in and just say it's just us as black people on this side of the world that are the only true Jews, you're completely discounting the rest of history and the idea and the notion that Jews were scattered in all sorts of different directions. And so were the ancient Israelites from the kingdom of Israel. What happened to them? They couldn't have married other people, married white folks, married into those white families, or whatever the case might have been, and let evolution take its place? That you wouldn't be able to recognize them today by looking at them and saying, well, their skin is black, they must be Jews. Or look at them, they have whatever the case might be. And I'm sure you can probably find in the places where they were scattered elements of their customs along the way. So just to be narrow thinking and think it's just us as black people on this side of the world, and completely forgetting and conveniently forgetting about all those other scatterings and places in the world that these Israelites and Jews could have ended up, is really narrow thinking. Just to go ahead with your bias that it's people with our skin who are the only true Jews. So really think about it. Do your history, do some research, and find out that Jews did not just end up in Africa and that's the only place they ended up or where they went. So when you're ready to run off talking about those white devils up there in Khazari and whatever the case might be, heck, those people have just as much claim as you do. Because in their little oral history, they're probably over there saying, yes, and our people came from the land of Israel, and they were scattered up here by the Assyrians, and they were scattered up here by the Babylonians, and some fled up here from the Romans, and they ended up in this place and that place, and we are the children of such and such a people. Your story is not unique, black Hebrew Israelites. So think it over. Stop being this narrow thinking because you want to be like God's special little snowflake. And then you can turn around and point your finger and condemn everybody else that they don't have it right. They're not the true Jews. Look at their skin color. They're evil. They're devils. They were created by somebody else. They sprung forth from Edom and all this other nonsense. If you think I'm wrong, after you go ahead and do your history and your research, come back and tell me about it. You can tell me about it from right now before you go researching. Just like, share, have your Hebrew Israelite friends check this video. Have your friends who are talking like Hebrew Israelites check this video. Just share it. Talk about it. Bring them over here. Subscribe to the channel. There's going to be more like this. Let's hear your thoughts. Let's hear your opinions. Let's hear your questions. Thank you for tuning in. This is your Serial Cynic. Have a good day.